family, I want to thank everyone for joining us, as well as those who are joining us online. Officiating today's service will be Rabbi David Minkas and Cantor Rachel Rosenberg, the congregation of Both Faith and Tzedek. Just as a gentle reminder before we begin, if anybody happens to have a cell phone still on, please take a moment and turn on silent. Thank you.
This is Psalm 121. Shir lama'alot, esa einai el heharim, me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai, osei shamayim va'aretz, al yitein lamod raglecha, al yanum shomrecha. Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha, al yad yeminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, ve'areach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikol ra. Yishmor et nafshecha, Adonai yishmor tzecha uvoecha, me'ata ve'ad olam, me'ata ve'ad olam. A song for ascents. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. Adonai will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your protection, a guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm and guard your life. Adonai guards your going and coming, now and forever.
The Jewish people respond to death with 3 words of blessing. In English, the words mean praised is the judge of truth. So let us begin our service with the wisdom of our tradition. And please repeat these words of blessing after me. Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. Praised is the judge of truth. Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach. Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. Adonai has given and Adonai has taken. Praise be the name of Adonai. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything. A time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing, a time for wailing, a time for birthing, and a time for dying, a time for speaking, and a time for silence, a time for seeking, and a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time, filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Harvey's life, Steve Herschel, with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people of Israel and the eternity of God. I'll ask that you turn to Psalm 23 and we'll read together. Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anoint my head with oil, my cup runneth over. All the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord. Now at this time I'll invite up Lisa to share some words.
I didn't expect this to be so hard because, as you know, I've been saying goodbye for a long time. But Rabbi Minka said it's not really Jewish tradition to celebrate life, but to recognize loss. And on the other hand, celebrating life is probably the way we realize the loss. So that's what I'm going to do. His life and his loves and his adventures were so strong, multifaceted, and often unexpected that it is impossible to do them justice. I could go broad and I could list for you all of his interests and his fascinations, everything he wanted to do, but that would be unfair to you because we would be here forever. So I'm going to go deep and touch on just a few things and suffice with being unfair to him. Justice is a word for Harvey, but justice was love, and it was his life and his avocation. Life wasn't always fair to Harvey as he was growing up, but he fought through and achieved what his parents hoped and what I suspect many friends never really expected. Justice was Harvey's calling, to make life fairer and better, not just for himself, but for others. As a union-side labor lawyer, as an arbitrator and mediator, as a supporter of causes, human rights, civil liberties, animal and environmental welfare, as an active supporter of Jewish organizations and of the religion itself. He engaged in this love of justice with so many people from so many different walks of life. They enriched him and he enriched them. He reveled in it. Thank you, everyone who joined him on those paths. So, you may know that there are only 2 people on a crew on a Chicago garbage truck. Once there were 3. Why are they only 2? Because many years ago, Harvey ruled that the city of Chicago could eliminate 1 person, probably 1 man back then, from the crew. I don't think I was even practicing labor law then, but I was aware of the newspaper coverage. It was a big deal. But Harvey also awarded a union wage increase against the state of Iowa, again, many years ago, 30 or more years ago. And then, when the then and now Governor Branstad sought to thwart the increase by ordering state agencies to implement his and similar awards, the Iowa Supreme Court upheld the decision, ordered the governor to pay the increases, and Harvey's award became a milestone for public employees' rights in the state of Iowa. We won't talk about the present state of the law in Iowa. He would not be happy. But I said I was going to go deep and not broad, so I'll continue to focus on that love of arbitration and mediation because it fit him so well. It allowed him to express and enhance his love of people in all their variety, his love of justice, his love of the written and spoken word, his love of theater, storytelling and engagement, his love of intellectual puzzles, and sharing it all. He loved the collegiality of our profession. And thank you, everybody, arbitrators, mediators, union and management, and anyone who participated with him in his professional life, because it was also his personal life. You made his life, and he loved you all for it. It meant so much to him to make a difference. Finally, one more slightly different deep thing, a note about today's date. It turns out that on April 13th, in 1992, the Chicago River sprang a leak. I didn't know it until I listened to the radio this morning, because what I was focused on was that 5 years later than that, on April 13th, Harvey and I got married. So today is our 25th anniversary. But you don't need to dwell on the drama of that, the poignancy, because while I was sitting with Harvey this past weekend, on a whim I looked at hebrew.com and looked up, and it turns out our wedding anniversary on the Hebrew calendar was last Thursday. So Harvey and I managed to fit in 6 extra days somewhere, and I will treasure them. And I apologize to Rabbi Dan Leifer of blessed memory, who was a better Gematrian than I am. I wish it could have been more than 6 days. I wish it could have been squeezed in before he got the terrible disease that he weathered with grace and good humor so much of the time. Losing his ability to speak was the ultimate irony and insult. He, even without being able to speak, he used his eyebrows to communicate with people around him. But throughout, he was bigger than life. He was a bigger than life lover of life, and most especially his religion, his friends, and his family. So I've gone deep. I'm going to let others go broad, and I just want to say, Josh and Jeremy, he loved you so much. I hope you know the depth of that love. And Denise and Max, their wives, he was so glad when you came into our lives through them. And Ava and Jerome, well, fishing at boys became even more special once you were there to share it. And as for my kids, Isaac and Russell and Kara and Carolyn and Michael and Ava and Susanna, sorry, I'm terrible at names today, Susanna, you all got the benefit of his love as well. So, cousins, nieces, nephews, relatives, friends, all, everyone I can't list. Here in person, there on the live stream, all in our hearts. I could go on, but I'll just say, Harvey, you have left us richer by knowing and loving us. And thank heavens how you can rest. I love you. Thank you.
Now Harvey's sons will come up and Josh will be first.
Hello, everybody. I'm Josh. I'm one of Harvey's sons. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. I know my dad would have wanted to be remembered by the people he touched in his life. And it means so much to all of us that you're here. I didn't think I'd be emotional for this, so I'm just going to plow into this and see where it goes. But anyway, thank you all for being here. You were all a part of his life, and if he touched you in any way, I think we're all the better for it. So yeah, Harvey Nathan was my father. And even though a very long illness gradually robbed him of his ability to communicate and to fully experience life with us, I've never not felt his presence in my life. His personality and principles have impacted me in ways I'm still discovering. I think all of you can look back and remember the Harvey Nathan that you knew. For me, I have the added blessing of seeing him whenever I look in the mirror. I feel I not just look like him, but I talk like him. I make the same bad jokes he did. Sometimes I talk too much like he did. Sometimes I say just the right thing like he did. And I'm still discovering what that means. I haven't been through this before, so I've talked to friends who've lost a parent, and they've all told me exactly the same thing, which is that the loss always felt so sudden to them, and they feel like their deceased parents gonna ring them up one day or just show up at the door. And I don't have the luxury of that delusion because we lost my dad so slowly. So if I really want to remember my dad, I have to go further back, and that's where I run into a little bit of trouble. So I think, unlike Lisa, who went deep, I'm probably going to go broad with this. My dad was many things to many people, and over the years I have a hard time reconciling my own experiences with him. And I know this because yesterday we had a dry run in the rabbi's office. And I quickly discovered that my memories of my father are incomplete, inaccurate, or out of context. I don't really have the ability to separate feelings from experience, from quantitative memory. And I think I'm very much like my father in that regard. And my dad was a very passionate person. So much so that I feel like every experience with him didn't simply happen. I think my memories of him are often confused because with my dad, nothing was a neutral occurrence. And of course, memories we have of people are not just of what we experienced of them or what they've said, but how they make us feel. And this was so true of my dad, who brought tremendous feeling to everything he did and said. So while I'm not clear on everything from my dad's life and from my life with him, I can remember every facial expression. I can remember every gesture. I can remember every time he raised his voice, which was usually in joy, if not always. And I remember most of all how he made people feel. My dad inspired excitement, laughter, occasionally a bit of embarrassment. He drew energy from those around him and gave back so much more in return. I hope that all of you still who experience this with him feel that energy in your hearts and carry it forward into your lives. Thank you again for being here.
Now I'll invite up Jeremy.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Nathan, and I am Harvey Nathan's second and youngest son. I stand before you today knowing I am going to fail in what I would like to do, but I'm going to try because he deserves no less. It's Passover season, and Passover is a time for asking questions. And so I'm going to start with a quote from Maya Angelou, which fits in very nicely with what my brother just talked about. The quote from Maya Angelou is as follows: "People will forget what you say. People will forget what you do. People will never forget how you made them feel." Of course, if it's not the things we say and do, how do you know how they make you feel? And I don't have the answer to that, just like I still don't know the answers to the 4 questions we ask every Passover. But we'll try, because when I think of my father, he is, as my brother mentioned, different things to different people. And I thought long and hard about this because we've had many years to witness this day coming. And I thought of 5 things that my father was to people: the brother, the friend, the husband, the dad, and the professional. I'm going to talk about each of them briefly because everybody in this room falls under one of these 5 categories. I mentioned the brother first as an homage to my father, born and raised in Yonkers, New York. Still had his New York accent until the very end. And of the people he grew up with, the son of Irving and Ida, brother of Mark, Mark is the only one who can remember his childhood so distinctly. And Mark, in typical New York fashion, is stuck in traffic and will be joining us. Oh, you made it. Hello, Uncle Mark. There are others, of course, from his childhood who are here. His cousin Stephen, I know, has made it here, and I am glad for that. But genuinely speaking, you never really know what someone's like unless you meet them at that time. And I really am not the fit person to talk about the brother, the cousin, the member of the Nathan family. But that's what he was to many people. The second category I'll talk about is perhaps the broadest to people in this room, and that is the friend. I know little of my father's childhood friends. I know that he was a beloved member of his fraternity and still kept in touch with his fraternity brothers regularly when he attended Syracuse University in upstate New York. He developed many friends when he went to law school at Northwestern University here in Chicago, which is where he settled and spent the rest of his life. I, growing up, will never forget the poker group that he participated in. For 35 years, every Tuesday night, he and his friends would get together and play poker in all its different forms. But friendship goes far beyond those who we met with intimately. As a member of the broader community, whether it's a neighbor or a member of a congregation, he valued those relationships deeply. And for those of you here in this congregation, as well as those that he was close with at West Suburban Temple, Har Zion, and River Forest, I cannot overstate how much he valued your camaraderie and friendship. And for that, I am grateful. The third person my father was a husband. And for more than 50 of his 79 years, my father was married. I would be remiss if I did not start with mentioning my mother, his first wife, Harvey A Nathan, to whom he was married for 24 years, who could not be here today, but I know is watching the live stream. Hi, Mom, if you're there. And it is because of her and my father's union that Josh and I are here. I make no judgments about marriage. People, as they grow, their lives may take a different course, and it happens. But that allows you the opportunity to continue to grow. And with that, my father met his second wife, Lisa, for whom I have a near measureless admiration for. Because in the 25 years that Lisa and my father were married, I watched my father become an even better person than he was. And for that, I will always be grateful to you, Lisa. The fourth person my father was a dad. And this is something that only me and my brother can hold closest. But I would also be remiss if I did not mention his stepchildren, my stepbrothers, who I consider brothers of my own, Isaac and Russell. Because there are certain things that you only learn from your father, certain experiences that you have that are shared by no one else, the good and the bad. I will tell you one personal thing about my father that he did as a father. Something that we discussed yesterday, but I'm going to elaborate on, which is how driven my father could be to drive us to something he saw as successful, even if it was something that you were not interested in. And if your interest was not his own, he would make sure that you really meant it. The example I give goes back to 1987, when I thought it was a good idea to enlist in the Army while still in high school, go to basic training between my junior and senior year. And my father was dead set against it. He did not like the idea. Jewish boys don't enlist in the Army, he told me. But I told him this is what I wanted to do. So we made an agreement. He took me to see the movie Platoon. And if I can emerge from that experience, not traumatized and still wanting to be in the Army, then he would allow me to enlist. And seeing Platoon with him, it only made me want to be a soldier more, because it made me recognize how important it is to be a good leader, teammate, and friend. And with that, my father's resistance to me joining the Army turned to one of support. And I am grateful for it. The last category that my father was, which probably encompasses more people than any other category, although sadly few would likely be in this room, is the professional. He was the consummate arbitrator and mediator. He loved deciding cases and trying to do what was best for everyone. And Lisa so eloquently described just a few examples of the great things he did during his very long career. But it does not end there. They say that if you spend 10,000 hours doing something, you will become an expert at it. And my father had many passions outside of law, although they were certainly secondary to it. He was a lover of travel and animals. World War II, he had a peerless encyclopedic knowledge and insights of firsthand stories, as well as of wine. I hope no one thinks he actually drank wine for 10,000 hours. But he certainly knew them, and he knew them well. And these are all characteristics of my father that I shall miss, but they will not be forgotten, because he was a man who lived with such passion for so long. It makes it hard to truly feel sad that he's gone, because it was a life well lived. I will miss him, but I cannot feel sad because he lived it to the full. Thank you for joining us today.
Harvey was born to a long line of strong personalities. He was shaped by these influences, and it molded him into the person he was, his own force of personality. If you were his family, if you appeared before him in court, served with him on the school board or on a synagogue committee, you knew Harvey Nathan wore his heart on his sleeve. There was no ambiguity about what he believed in. He was a deeply and unapologetically nostalgic person. He had a firm, perhaps unwavering sense of what was right and wrong in the world, as well as how one should live that proper life. He was a labor man. Like his personality and his overall outlook on life, it was shaped by growing up in Yonkers in a housing development of the amalgamated workers. He was also impacted by his family all living in or near this development. As a child, he lived in a very close family. He was born to Ida and Irving, and not long after there followed his younger brother, Mark. Unlike his father and brother, he was not very athletic. He was not going to have a baseball career, but he was always seen as a ham, and often was told that he would become a lawyer. And I think, perhaps unlike many lawyers, it was a career he was always proud of and always happy that he chose. And the world is happy that he chose it. People would say to a young Harvey, "You're going to be a lawyer." And they were seeing his passion and calling upon that passion and those natural gifts rather than projecting their aspirations onto him. Harvey went to Syracuse, where he was active in his fraternity, and it's really where his career in law and his values of social action aligned. He lobbied an elder brother in his fraternity, who had connections locally in Syracuse, to ensure that the visiting Sammy Davis Jr. would be allowed to stay in the local hotel, when at the time, all other black visitors were barred from renting a hotel room. This helped pave the way for a career of standing up for what is right and for those whose voice was being ignored or stifled. Harvey began his career working at different firms and for different people, but Harvey was not meant to be someone who worked for someone else. Leave that to people with fewer opinions. And in the early 80s, Harvey set off on his own career and never looked back. And there are innumerable individuals, unions, and group of people who are standing taller, more secure because of him and that decision. We heard Harvey moved to Chicago to attend law school at Northwestern and moved into an apartment first on 57th Street and then on Hyde Park Boulevard. And along with his first wife, Marianne, who was blessed with Josh and Jeremy. Harvey loved to travel, and early on it was their family vacations, first without the boys and then with them, to Boyd's Mason in northern Wisconsin. Harvey loved fishing. He shared that passion with his family, along with his love of wine, and getting great wine at a good price was a double bonus and a double joy. And he shared his advice on all manners of life with his children. This included, among many other things, that when a woman walks into a room, including a large dining hall in college, you stand up. That dated tip to Josh, an incoming college freshman, was true to who Harvey was. Perhaps he could not always read a room, but it was clear his heart was in the right place, and he knew what was important, and he was going to communicate that to you. As someone, we heard, who was deeply into military history and especially World War II, he recalled being in the sandbox, hearing the banging on pots and pans during VE Day. He was immensely proud of Josh going to West Point and his career in the military. Jeremy. In the early 90s, Harvey began training another lawyer who had first appeared before him as an advocate. This lawyer was Lisa Cohn. They got to know each other's styles so well that Lisa could not only recognize Harvey's writing, but could write that way herself, and Harvey could do the same. But what began as a professional relationship bloomed into a beautiful love that was and is and will be enduring. You traveled together, near and far, quite far, visiting many different continents, always balancing your many interests and connections while on those trips. You guys were a great pair. You two were one of the first people that I really got to know when I came here to Road Faye. And Harvey welcomed me with open arms, and those arms did not only make me feel more welcome, but brought me closer to recognizing that this was where I wanted to be. Because if this place had people like Harvey, I knew that this was the kind of community I wanted to be a part of. Lisa, you were an amazing partner. When Harvey was at his best, full of life and joy, enjoying a safari, a first trip to Israel, or the carefree atmosphere of the Road Faye retreat, as well as when he was losing that spark, and then when he was deteriorating. You were a constant blessing for him, the metaphoric Shema, the prayer you embodied for him, and the prayer that you read to him the other night that let him know it's okay. It's okay to let go. In a couple of days, we will begin the festival that I can only imagine resonated with Harvey on a deeply personal level as a Jew, as someone whose faith was central to him and to his core value of freedom and dignity. Passover is a holiday that is not only sacred for its place on the calendar and the story that it inspired us to tell and retell, but because of its rites, the ritual reenactments that are supposed to inspire us to action. And they did for Harvey. But as I sat with Josh, Jeremy, Lisa, Isaac, and Russell, yesterday listening to the stories of a man who loved his music, his early investment in Starbucks, who was an enemy of a governor of Iowa, and an imparter of wisdom from dating to bar mitzvah suits. The image that was coming into my head the whole time was that of Moses. Moses was someone who sometimes struggled with finding the right words, sometimes was consumed with passion and consumed by that passion. Someone who struggled with his boss and was someone who was unwavering in knowing what was right. I heard Harvey in that description. I saw a leader who was, unlike so many of us, not undone by imperfection nor unwilling to succumb to them. He wore his heart on his sleeve, telling his children, wife, poker buddies, stepchildren, grandchildren, daughter-in-laws, the world, that to know Harvey was to see what was important in him and to see it reflected back to them. Harvey will be missed, and may his memory be for a blessing.
We rise now for the memorial prayer in Malay. El Malay Rachamim Shochen B'Meromim Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina B'Ma'alot Kedoshim U'Tolim Kezoar Harakia Mazhiri et nishmat Tzvi Hershel ben Yisrael v'chaya shalach leolamo began Eden tehe menuchato ana bal harachamim hastireu b'seter knafecha leolamim Utzror bitzror achayim et nishmato Adonai unachalato V'yanuach v'shalom al mishkafo V'nomar Amen. O God, full of compassion, Thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence, among the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament unto the soul of Harvey A. Nathan, who has gone unto eternity. Lord of mercy, bring him under the cover of thy wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be God's possession, and may his repose be peace. And let us say,
Amen.
Please be seated for a moment. This concludes our service here at the synagogue. Sermon will follow immediately at the family's plot at Oakwood Cemetery. The family will be sitting Shiva at the family home Wednesday and Thursday evening from 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. That information is on the service order received on the way in. And for those who are watching on the live stream, it's on the website as well. Memorial contributions in Mr. Nathan's memory can be made to the charity of your choice, particularly supporting civil and human rights, animal welfare, or the environment. For those of us joining in the procession to the cemetery, we'll be forming a procession just outside the synagogue parking lot facing east. Please make sure you obtain an orange funeral safety sticker as well as a magnetic flag for the rooftop portion of your vehicle. Please have your bright headlights and your hazard lights on at all times, and try to avoid any large gaps as we drive, especially as we pass through intersections An additional reminder, please do not use your cellular device, especially texting, while on the way to the cemetery. The following individuals have been asked to serve as pallbearers. When I call your name, please rise and stand next to Mr. Nathan's casket. Russell, Isaac, Josh, Jerome, Jeremy, and Jack. Yeah.
Because Mark managed to get here, his brother Mark was there.
We'd also like to, Mark, if you could please rise as well. At this time, I'd like to invite everyone to please rise and to support Mr. Nathan, the pallbearers, the clergy, and everybody in attendance from
Stay
the
behind, just a minute away. Stay behind, just a minute away.
It's all behind you.